Yes,
I
Octavia.
think it's dangerous to assume that whatever we've been doing, we're going to keep doing that. You know, the future is more of the same, only more advanced.
Octavia Butler was a legendary sci-fi writer. Not only has her work revolutionized the sci-fi genre, it's had lasting impacts on the abolitionist movement. She infused the harsh realities of the current system and its history with hope and the possibility for change. As Ruth Wilson Gilmore says, abolition is life in rehearsal, not a repetition of rules. Octavia wrote science fiction that imagined different futures than simply more of the same. She speculated ways to build community, challenge the status quo, and use the mindset of the future in how you address the past. Most of her protagonists were Black women. Her protagonists were strong and self-determined leaders that worked against oppressive systems. In this video essay, I'll be celebrating the work of Octavia and those inspired by her to inspire you, the viewer, to engage with reading and writing visionary fiction, because dreaming and imagining are essential to an abolitionist future. Author and activist Adrienne Maree Brown began to study science fiction as sacred, political, philosophical text after reading the works of Octavia. Adrienne Maree Brown writes on page 23 of her book Emergent Strategy that science fiction, particularly visionary fiction, is where she goes when she needs the medicine of possibility applied to the trauma of human behavior. Walidah Imarisha, in the intro to Octavia's Brood, asserts that all organizing is science fiction, and that whenever we imagine ourselves in a world without prisons, without capitalism, without violence, that we ourselves are engaging in speculative fiction. We are engaging in science fiction.
Through media-based organizing, we shift from consumers of information to producers, from objects within narratives of exploitation and violence to authors of the transformation of our world.
Octavia's Brood exists because if we want futures that are different from our past and our present, we must write them and write ourselves into them. We must use our storytelling to insert ourselves in time and to intervene on the regrets of our ancestors. We must ideate and dream together and let go of competition at the roots of our imagination.
We named this project Octavia's Brood in honor of Octavia Butler. Octavia, y'all!
What's truly magical about Octavia's work is she doesn't ignore the current harmful, oppressive system, but acknowledges it and writes its downfall into being. She makes it clear how things can change. In a system of organized abandonment, we need community care. In a system reliant on punishment, we need transformative justice. Her stories give many visions of how we can change and how we can have a better future.
And so we believe that she actually epitomizes the principles of visionary fiction, which is a term that we created to talk about this kind of radical, transformative science fiction that we are doing. And so these are some of the principles. Because we actually believe that all organizing is science fiction. You know, we imagine these worlds without prisons, without police brutality, without poverty, without all of these isms that crush all of us, and that is science fiction.
In the introduction to Octavia's Brood on page 10, Walidah Imarisha coins the term visionary fiction as science fiction that builds better worlds instead of reinforcing logic of existing power structures. Abolitionist organizing necessitates imagining a world without prisons. It's difficult to imagine what a world outside of the status quo would look like, but it's necessary if we want things to get better. Visionary fiction is so important because abolition is about experimenting in every way possible in order to radically shift society to be more caring and community-driven.
We believe that ability to dream collectively is what is going to be able to move us towards that collective vision as one.
Imagination is incredibly relevant to politics. The status quo infiltrates our imaginations. So many people get lost in the imaginations of those in power. The idea is that our livelihoods would be damaged if we fight for change, that we can only function within a system based on harm, and any gains we make to improve our lives will be paired with rising taxes, job losses, and even violence. We also get lost in the imagination that change must be top-down in order to be significant, even though most lasting change arises from grassroots movements and coalitions. Imagination is at the core of politics. Rather than be limited by the imagination of those in power, we must use collective imagination to dream up what else is possible. The status quo could be reiterated, but what would it look like if it wasn't? Imagine what a world with communities of care, accountability, not punishment, and everyone having their basic needs met would look like. Imagine the steps we would take to reach that world. Abolitionist organizers do this every day. Imagine a world without prisons and bring that imagination to being through praxis, such as using transformative justice strategies or participating in mutual aid collectives. Writing visionary fiction is also praxis, theory and application, as it puts the principles of abolition into practice through experimenting with different ideas of how we could shape the future.
And as Octavia learned, and as she questioned, and as she wondered how were humans going to find a way to survive on this planet, she asked those questions and brought them into the text. And in her text, we see all the ways that she was trying to answer those questions, trying to trouble the waters, trying to give us nothing easy, but something super compelling to look forward to. So the work that she did, Walidah, Imarisha, and I, when we did Octavia's Brood, Walidah called it visionary fiction, to look ahead at the future and then write ourselves in. And that's what Octavia was doing with all of her work.
Octavia's novel, Parable of the Sower, has recently been made into a graphic novel adaptation, which is pictured on the screen. In this coming-of-age story, the protagonist, Lauren, a young black woman, creates her own religion called Earthseed, based on the importance of change. Through her lived experiences with harm and oppression, she learned not to look for answers within the current system, but to look toward the future. Reading Parable of the Sower reaffirmed my belief that a better world is possible. Octavia writes about how through community we can transcend the imagination barriers of the status quo and build the kind of world that the current harmful structures don't want us to believe is possible. Visionary fiction is praxis, or theory and application, because it builds faith in a better future. As Gilmore says, abolition is life in rehearsal. Every aspect of abolitionist praxis is generative of a better world, holding people accountable rather than punishing them, supporting each other's growth individually and collectively, meeting each other's needs and building communities of care. Through caring for one another, we can challenge the value system of a radical individualist culture with a value system of collaboration and community progress. On page 91 of Emergent Strategy, Adrienne Marie Brown quotes Terry Marshall, "The most powerful thing for organizers to have, I believe, is faith, the belief that we can win, that we can change the world, that we can all be better." Works like Octavia's strengthen our faith in a better world. Octavia, through the voice of Lauren, posits that being in community with one another is generative of a better world. Through spreading ideas of how to live in community with each other, we can experiment with futures different from more of the same. Octavia's work is generative. Her work challenges the status quo's imagination of what future is possible, introducing the potential for a better future. One of my favorite aspects of this text is the tenets of Earthseed, what the character Lauren wrote as the fictional religion's key principles. God is change, and the idea of shaping God empower humanity to take collective action towards change rather than trust those in power to shape the future. These tenets are not meant to ease worry or quell anger, but to fuel self-determination and build faith in a better future.
Over and over again, you saw that what the writers were writing about was their own time, but just more of it, or harder, or higher, or whatever, more of the same.
This Octavia Butler quote, "All successful life is adaptable, opportunistic, tenacious, interconnected, and fecund. Understand this, use it, shape God."
So from that, I would say emergent strategy is learning how to be fractal. Small scale reflects the large scale. How to be adaptive in right relationship to change, but also with intention. Because if you just change all the time, you're just changing all the time, you're just a mess, you're just a leaf blown in the wind. But changing with an idea of like, oh, I'm a bird, I'm trying to get to Mexico for my migration, a storm came, how do I still get myself to Mexico? Then nonlinear and iterative, resilient, being in a practice of transformative justice, which I think we are just beginning to understand what transformative justice is or could be for us as a species. And then interdependent and decentralized, and always creating more possibilities.
Featured in Octavia's Brood, Alexis Pauline Gumbs' piece Evidence has very similar themes to Parable of the Sower, and does a great job at continuing Octavia's legacy.
Oh my goodness. I was watching actually a video of her on Charlie Rose today, and she was talking about what it meant to write herself in, like to create a world and be able to write herself into it, and how much that meant to her as somebody who was excluded in all the ways that she could imagine. And I think about, what does it mean for us to collectively claim that we can do that? I think that it's prescient, it's genius, it's crucial that the two of you have said, no, we exist, we claim ourselves. Octavia Butler is present and her legacy is active, and we're actually going to create a space where that can be visible, and therefore it can expand and it can move. I feel really grateful for a space to actively create my relationship to Octavia Butler's legacy, and to be able to name myself as somebody who participates in that legacy and then act on it with a collective of people is amazing. It's like something that could have been in an Octavia Butler novel. By reading past this point, you agree that you are accountable to the council. You affirm our collective agreement that in the time of accountability, the time past law and order, the story is the storehouse of justice. We believe now in the experience of brilliance on the scale of the intergalactic tribe. Today, the evidence we need is legacy. May the public record show and celebrate that a Landress consciously exists in an ancestral context. May this living textual copy of her digital compilation and all its future amendments be a resource for a Landress, her mentors, her loved ones and partners, her descendants and detractors to use in the ongoing process of supporting her just intentions. We are grateful that you are reading this. Thank you for remembering. With love and what our ancestors called faith, the Intergenerational Council of Possible Elders. Exhibit C, Notes from Dritz, age 25, dissertation research notebooks on the time that silence broke. Artifact, found as a zoomed-in image of a stained subway cave, AKA the writing on the wall. Wait for the time when blood is all we have left to write with, they said. First in a blog post, then in circulated emails, then on scraps of cloth, then scrawled on the remaining walls, then in dirt when they could find it at the end. Wait for the time when a woman must eat her own sorcery to bleed the ink of her existence. Let her write it and leave it. Let her call it future. So I waited. And when I couldn't wait anymore, I waited 28 more days. If you can read this, I am evidence. We have been wrong all along. Blood is not money. Money is not food. The anonymous prophets were right. We cannot afford our own blood. As I write this, the air is thick with our failure, and I am alone. Remember us and heal. Note, archaeologists say that this engraving came slightly earlier than the other markings all over the planet, in small, mostly unrecorded places, spelled L-O-V-E, 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 My story is about time travel through intellectual practice. It's like, do we time travel through our reading, through our writing, through our thinking? Are we actually receiving messages from and sending messages to people who lived in different generations through the way we use language?
So, in Evidence, Alexis Pauline Gumbs explores what it looks like to collectively create a world and write yourself into it by means of time travel. Not the Buck Rogers kind, though. This is time travel through intellectual practice. She deftly and lovingly writes a story that asks these questions. Do we time travel through reading, writing, and thinking? Are we actually receiving messages from and sending messages to people who lived in different generations through the way we use language? And if so, in this quantum entangled universe where the self is understood as a vessel open to time and fueled by presence as multiple as it is singular, what would we say to our ancestors and they to us?